Welcome to One Work, Five Questions with Donna Vitek and Dr. Mark Andrew Holowchak. Thank you for joining us this evening, Dr. Holowchak.
It is evening, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, and I had a surprise to show you, and I completely left it. I forgot it. Oh,
Okay.
I have, well, I guess I can show you on my phone. You'll be very proud. I got something in the mail today.
Which is, oh, you got your diploma. Good for
My
you.
master's
Yeah.
degree. Yes, yes. I meant to bring it in here to show our audience.
And you didn't even have to send in 3 tricks box tops for that? Remember
Four.
when we were 4? Well, I had to do 5 for mine because mine are great.
I'm gonna put mine way far back behind me too, so I can say they're doctorates.
Put it in the books. Put it in that library of yours back there.
Oh, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna put it in one of my books to keep
Your
it nice and flat.
library.
I read
Okay.
every one of those.
What are we doing today?
Oh, I forgot. Yes, we have a show. Okay. Today we're talking about Thomas Jefferson's letter to Francis Hopkinson, dated the 13th of March in 1789. But first, I want to give everyone your credentials and so they know. I think that's very important when we're doing history, to make sure someone is qualified to speak on a topic.
You think so?
Yes, I do.
All
That
right.
is so important to me. I learned that in graduate school. I would always look up what the person's their education and experience before I would listen to anything that they had to say. Okay, so, and you were my favorite.
Oh, thank you.
Yes,
I hope
you
I
still
have some
are.
credentials.
You do, you do. And here are his credentials. He's a retired professor of philosophy and history. What a great I mean, I think that's the best combination. Now that I've
Just
learned so
joined
much.
here.
Oh, there's Jeffy. Hi, Jeffy. Oh, that's the star of our show.
Heard your voice.
Yes.
All right,
He
speed
ta-
up
he
through the
taught.
credentials. They know them already. Let's
Okay.
get
Oh,
on the
but I
Hopkinson.
like talking about your
All right.
credentials, though. About all of your over 23 books, published books now, or 23 published books?
23.
23 published books on Thomas Jefferson, close to 155 essays on Jefferson. One day I'm going to write an essay. One of these days. I don't know that I could say anything that you haven't already. You've spoken so much and you know so much. I feel inferior. Okay, so with our show, One Work, Five Questions, I will ask Dr. Holowchak 5 questions on one work of Thomas Jefferson, and he will answer the questions. And
We hope.
today, well, yes. Oh, you always do such a thorough
I
job,
or Jeffy will. He'll help us out.
Jeffy. Okay, so well, I did want to. I know this is disappointing, and I don't like to disappoint you. I hate disappointing you.
Okay.
But I have to say I'm sorry. I was not able to get Jennifer Aniston on the show. Not this week, but we'll have to keep trying. So we did get a missive from Jennifer Ampersand, who agreed to come on the show and discuss her dislike of fettuccine.
Well, hey, that's close enough. We can't get Aniston. If that's how Aniston, we'll get ampersand.
Jennifer Ampersand, yes.
Ampersand.
Okay, well, that's neither here nor there. This week, as a follow-up to last week's show, we turned to Thomas Jefferson's political orientation. Ooh. We aim to answer this question: was Thomas Jefferson a politician or political theorist? That is, a philosopher. And I think I know the answer. I should know after all of these shows.
You should.
Well,
we're going to give some meat and potatoes to it too.
Okay.
We're not just going to say one or the other. We're going to give some arguments for it.
Yes, yes. So we'll examine his letter to Francis Hopkinson in search of an answer to that question. And I am Donna Vitek, and this is One Work, Five Questions. Are you ready, Dr. Holowchak?
I'm ready.
Okay. Question number 1. Who was Francis Hopkinson?
Well, prior to doing the letter, I didn't know a heck of a lot about him, and I did just a modicum of research on him. He was an older contemporary of Jefferson, born in 1737. He was a lifelong Philadelphian, one of the founding fathers, signer of the Declaration. He was a man talented in many ways. He was a musician, a lawyer, a songwriter, and a satirist. And
Wow.
I like the satirist part the best. He is said to have designed paper money for the colonies. He designed the first U.S. flag. We don't have any copies of it, but so with 7 white stripes and 6 red stripes and 13, not 5-point, but 6-point stars. He was also an important member of the American Philosophical Society, and I think that's where he met Jefferson. And there was a substantial correspondence between the two that was begun in 1783 on the 23rd of December with a letter from Hopkinson's to Jefferson. But looking a little bit into some of the background and some of the essays, he's the sort of person when you read sort of his satirical essays, just kind of fun to read. I ordered a small booklet of some of his essays and stuff so I can get that. He had a very wonderful sense of humor, unlike Jefferson. So
yeah, Mr. Stoic.
he was a very sort of polymathic person, sort of like Jefferson, but not as serious as Jefferson. So.
Oh, okay. Wow. He sounds like an interesting person.
Yes, he is. I sort of have fallen for him a little bit. Sounds very fascinating to me.
Okay. Maybe that's your next project.
No, not at all.
Oh, okay. You ready for question number 2?
I guess so.
Okay. The letter does mention of the Book of Songs and the pathos they evoked in Thomas Jefferson's daughter Mary. No doubt they were songs by Hopkinson. Anyways, you promised that this letter would tell us about Thomas Jefferson's political orientation. What does it tell us?
Yeah, and that's the gist of what I wanted to get at in this letter. Because last time we were talking about Jefferson, we talked about Jefferson in Washington, in the hot water that Jefferson was in on account of his partisan politicking. And we talked about Jefferson's relationship to Alexander Hamilton as well. And I thought this would be a nice sort of follow-up to, because it's been my position that everybody continually says Jefferson fathered, republicanism. Republicanism of his day is not like the republicanism of today.
No.
It was contrasted with Hamiltonian or Adamsian federalism. We've talked about what Jefferson republicanism is, weak government. You had the federal government doing trade and what it had to do overseeing. So then you had the state governments, the county governments, and then local governments, and then you had individual households. And Jefferson being a staunch liberal, just thought that that people in their own households should be able to direct their own affairs.
Right.
And that's not what the Federalists thought, at least the Hamiltonians thought.
Right.
He says here, and it's one of my favorite quotes. He says, talking about federalism and anti-federalism, he goes, I'm not a federalist because I never submitted the whole system of my opinions to the creed of any party of men, whatever, in religion, in philosophy, in politics, or in anything else where I was capable, I like this line, of thinking for myself. You heard me say that a lot.
Yes.
I get interviewed on a lot of rightist talk shows, and that's fine, because I have a lot of opinions that are right leaning. But I always say, as Jefferson always said, is I'm not a rightist, nor am I a leftist. I always qualify that by saying, because I can think for myself. I don't need a party thinking through all the issues for me. And then where I can just say Jefferson's leaving, I can just say ditto. So he said, when I'm capable of thinking for myself, such an addiction, calls it an addiction, being partisan, is the last degradation of a free and moral agent. Isn't that a beautiful line? If I could not go to heaven but with a party, I would not go there at all.
Ah, that's
Even
so
heaven, if heaven had to be partisan, is not a heaven. Therefore, I protest to you, I am not of the party of Federalists, but I am much farther from that of the anti-Federalists. So that's a powerful, powerful statement to the effect that Thomas Jefferson is not partisan. And this is, even though it's in 1789, while he's still in France, he never changes his mind.
right, right. Yeah, it's so funny because that's what I highlighted in the letter. I highlighted that if I could not go to heaven but with a party, I would not go there at
What a
all.
beautiful line. It's
Yeah.
a very, to me, it's a very moving line. And I think people, when they do Thomas Jefferson talk about his partisan politics, ought to keep this letter in mind. Of
Hmm.
course, their response would be he's being inconsistent as usual. He's not. Maybe we could
No,
talk about that a little bit, but
no, he's not.
that's really what I want to get at. I mean, we can say more. Well, hopefully we'll say more about, his views, but
Yeah. Okay.
I have
Well,
a question too.
okay. And then question number 3. Oh, I'm not printing anymore. I'm trying to go off of the computer instead of printing everything.
It saves paper that way. You're
So yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. I could save paper.
environmentally conscious after your birthday or something happened.
Well, okay. If I'm honest, I'm doing it to well, save paper, toner, and then I'm looking at the screen instead of looking down and reading.
It
So
doesn't matter.
yeah, but I don't know. I keep clicking around and losing the Zoom box. Um, okay, so question number 3. So Thomas Jefferson was not a Federalist and not an anti-Federalist. He did begin his own party, Republicanism, did he not?
Well, it's something I think we talked about last time. I don't really see him as thinking in his own mind. Certainly, he began his own party in a sense, but I don't think it's Jefferson that formed the Republican political party as much as Hamilton, who did. By Hamilton, his squabbles with Thomas Jefferson sort of forced Jefferson to articulate his political views. But as I said before, I don't see them, Jeff, settle down. I don't see them as political views, but I see them more as philosophical views. So in the answer to the question, I think, when we talk about what's going on with Thomas Jefferson, his views were philosophically grounded, not politically grounded. And I don't think Hamilton would say that. Someone like Hamilton would say, philosophical views, we're talking about a political philosophy, that's all a bunch of garbage. There's no such thing as that. People just have political views, and you're trying to play the role of philosopher, whatever. Jefferson never talks of himself as a political philosopher, but he is. So I just don't see anything here that is really the statement that forces Jefferson into being a partisan politician. I take it very seriously. I mean, I'm bringing out this letter because I take what he says very seriously. And if we keep this in the background and then try to understand his views, which we talked about in one of his 1816 letters about what republicanism, we can go back to that again. He articulates that in his first inaugural address, and many, part of it's in his declaration and so forth. We start to understand that this is a philosophical viewpoint that Jefferson's articulating, not so much a political viewpoint.
That makes me wonder if maybe our government ought to look in that direction from the philosophical view as Jefferson did. We may have a better society that way.
Maybe not. I leave that open. I'll explain in a bit.
Yeah, I was thinking we need to have a hodgepodge day where we get to just ask do a bunch of questions on different subjects. There's so many things. Okay, question number 4. What is the difference between being a political theorist or political philosopher and a politician? Do you not write about that in Thomas Jefferson's Political Philosophy and the Metaphysics of Utopia?
Yeah, and I will put out a copy of that
Let's
book
see.
right here, Jefferson's Political
Okay.
Philosophy and the Metaphysics of
Okay.
Utopia. Um, that's where I, for the most part, articulate that view that Jefferson's a political philosopher. A lot of people don't even think, he's a sound politician, that he doesn't have a consistent political position. But if we could understand a politician is just someone who practices politics and has views. And a politician does not necessarily have to have a consistent political vision.
Right.
Even following Jefferson's views, you'd say that a politician should be sort of a reflection of his constituency, should sort of be the sort of person. But that view is grounded on a philosophy. A political philosopher is one whose political views are grounded in a philosophical vision about the way the world is, about human nature. And Jefferson had a view that humans are essentially freedom-loving beings. And I qualified my answer in the last question by saying, maybe he was right, maybe he wasn't. Now, whether humans are freedom-loving beings, I think that's something that can be argued. I think it is rather dangerous to assert the opposite, that we're not, because it leaves room for the Putins of the world to come in and tell us just how we ought to live our life. And remember the great John Stuart Mills in his On Liberty said, our own view of life and living is good, not because it's good in and of itself. It's good because it's our own view, i.e. when someone else, we can have our own views and live our life a certain way and be entirely miserable or mistaken, but it's our own view, and it's so much better to have our own view than have someone to tell us how to live.
Right.
I'm doing research, and I finished a copy of my book on Stalin and the EU's Ukrainian policies from 1928 to 1933. And he became very autocratic in massacring and killing people that have done dirty work for him, that are killing people for him. Anybody who knew anything about what's going on wound up being killed by his great purge. But I mean, that's a sort of risk you run when you get autocrats. You can't trust anybody. Same thing is going on in Putin's Russia today. Something similar is going on. So you run that sort of risk in thinking, is this sort of liberalism that Jefferson advocates a good thing? I tend to think that it is. I think it's the only workable alternative out of what's out there, the only viable alternative. So political philosopher is someone who has a vision of what the human organism is, and then how the human organism would best function or live in the world, right? A vision, as I said, of utopia. And Jefferson, as I mentioned in this book, I have a whole chapter on the utopian literature that Jefferson read and Jefferson loved. Mercier's Land 2440, The Year 2440, and other utopian works. Bacon's fantastic utopian Utopia, and other works that Condorcet and other people that he read. Plato even he read, and Plato had a sort of utopia, which was very un-Jefferson-like. But the point is that, a political philosopher will have a vision of what the good life is, what the aim of human life is, and will try to instantiate or insert a sort of view of a political vision, a political milieu or environment in which people can live that life and flourish, hopefully flourish. So Jefferson, I call him in my first book a liberal eudaimonism. Eudaimonia is Greek for happiness or good godliness. So I think Jefferson both was a liberal in the Lockean tradition, but also fell back upon the Greek communitarian thinkers who thought that the whole idea of the city state being something much more important than the individuals. Jefferson I think thought the individual was much more important, but he thought we had to live within a community. So we have to have a sense of community as well. It's not just, okay, cool for individuals to do whatever they want to do. They have to function in a community of other people, right? And they need to be subject to the small amount of laws, and they need to be aware of the liberties of other people, other people's freedom to do what they want to do.
Right. And he mentions that in the letter of the Bill of Rights. He wants the Bill of Rights to guard liberty against legislative as well as executive branches of the government. And he talks about to secure freedom of religion, liberty against the legislative as well as executive branches of the government. So he wanted us to be protected from the legislative and executive branches of the government. So he really was for the people.
Yes, because he realized that the people, once they got into positions of powers, for a certain amount of time, some of them could not be trusted.
Right.
Experience played that out. So there had to be a system. And as you pointed out, I think last week, education was of vital importance to help that out. We had to be educated in the right sort of, in liberal thinking, in the right sort of way.
Yeah, he certainly was. I think I see Jefferson as very idealistic in his views, and that's So and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work.
Well, that's what a lot of people say. The difference between Jefferson, we'll talk about this sometime. Jefferson and Madison is that Madison's the practicalist, Jefferson's the idealist.
Yeah. And
a lot of people who prefer Madison to Jefferson will say that just for that reason. Well, Madison brought Jefferson back to earth, brought him, back to earth, and he was too much pie in the sky at times. I have, we do laugh at that. In some sense, the objection is true, but I have one counter remonstrance to that remonstrance. I have one argument against that argument. It's these idealists, that get us the hell out of bed every morning.
Yeah.
If we just were staunch realists that this is the way, or sort of Hamiltonians or Federalists saying, no, it's the wealthy people and the people in power are always going to have their way, and we're never going to go beyond that. It's sort of hard to wake up in the morning and think, okay, what are we going to do today? Let's, So it's these idealists, as long as their ideas are headed in the right direction, or roseate, honest and clean, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
They're the ones that get us out of bed. So maybe the idealists are wrong to be so pie in the sky. I don't think so.
Well, we're all a good mix. I think
we need a mix of realism and idealism. Yes.
Right. And stoicism.
Idealism that's grounded in reality. And I think Jefferson was a grounded person. I really do.
We have realism, idealism, and stoicism.
What was the last?
Stoicism.
Stoicism, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have argued in my book on morality. We could talk about some other. Jefferson was a Stoic, even though he said he wasn't a Stoic. I said he was a Stoic. Wow. That's a pretty powerful claim.
I would say now, after we've been doing this for, we've been doing this for a year now, haven't we?
Close to a year, yeah. This is what, the 33rd episode?
Let me see.
32nd.
Yeah. So
32nd episode, yeah, quite a few.
So and I would say yes. In the beginning, I would have said, really, he is. But now that I see how he has responded to things and how he responds to people, and I think I'm more in agreement with that.
Well, there are a couple quotes. We'll talk about this in a later occasion. There are a couple quotes where Jefferson just roundly condemns Stoicism.
Oh, wow.
Abject, right? Pathé. It's abject apatheia. It's it's indifference to things, and and you think that he's ill-suited, but when push comes to shove, he's a practicing Stoic all the way. And I'll show you a number of quotes. We'll talk about that on another day.
Okay.
I really do think he's a practicing Stoic.
We do. We have, we probably have another 2 years worth of material we can do.
Much more than that. This can go on for 20 years.
Let's go.
He's got 19,000 letters, not to mention the other things that he wrote. So.
Oh boy. Okay.
20,000 episodes. You better get on the ball here.
I hope Jennifer can make it to one, at least one. Oh, well, we
If
better
you're
move on to question number 5. I see we're running out of time. We have about
okay.
10 minutes left.
All right.
And okay, so question number 5. I don't want to get into Thomas Jefferson's criticism of the new Constitution because we covered that already. Is there anything else noteworthy about this letter?
Well, yeah, that's the second thing I want to talk about. This letter comes in the last few lines. I don't know how many sentences there are here, last 5 sentences. I think he says, I never had an opinion in politics or religion which I was afraid to own. A cost of reserve on these subjects might have procured me more esteem from some people, but less from myself. My great wish is to go on in the strict but silent performance of my duty, to avoid attracting notice and to keep my name out of newspapers, because I find the pain of a little censor, even when it is unfounded, is more acute than the pleasure of much praise. People have made much of that line. He's very thin-skinned. Okay, the attaching circumstance of my present office is that I can do its duties unseen by those for whom they are done. Now, I think if you read this carefully, what we can draw out is several things, and I listed. One is ownership. Jefferson is not afraid to speak his mind on certain things, and he's not afraid to stand behind the things that he says. So he's not afraid to take ownership. One case where he probably eschews ownership was when he talks about his religious views, because coming clean on his religious views would have gotten him, as a Unitarian, in great political turmoil, tohu bohu, and he wanted to avoid that. Go on a strict performance, so with ownership comes risk, right? He says cost of reserve had procured me more esteem, right? He said he wasn't afraid to state his views, and he knew that it might lead to certain amounts of censor, and he says he's not afraid to own up to that. He talks of twice in these sentences his strict silent performance of his duty. He doesn't care so much to be in the limelight. A lot of scholars would say that's false. He loved the limelight. I don't think so. I take him at his word here. He when he was elected president, he had a simple ceremony, and he walked instead of was in a chariot, and he didn't dress in full regalia. But so it talks about strict and silent performance, and this notion of silence is tremendously important as well, because silence implies, in some sense, that he talks of before, that people know that government is going on smoothly and rightly in a Republican way when they don't even know that there's anybody governing, in a manner of speaking, when it is done silently. In other words, it's reflecting the will of the people. He's doing the job. We talked about, he admits here that he is thin-skinned. And I take that literally. I think later in life he develops a much thicker skin.
Yeah.
But for the most of his life, I think he was rather thin-skinned, and he didn't tolerate criticism all that easily. Another reason to think that he didn't have an affair with Sally Hemings, because it brought criticism on him. When Callender's claims came out, early in his presidency, had he had an affair with Sally Hemings, and if he had been having one, he would have stopped. But according to the view that everybody puts forth, he kept on with the relationship in spite of the shame it might have brought his family, right? And then the last thing I think this shows is invisibility, is that, good government is invisible government. And Jefferson liked to think of himself as invisible. And when I talk about his commitment to invisibility, I talk about as well to surrounding himself by a cabinet of highly intelligent people, as did George Washington, and taking their opinions rather seriously into consideration before he made a judgment. So that's, those are the two things I think to get out of this letter.
Oh, good. Yeah. This was, again, I hate to see that he's has to defend himself. But he's very good at writing. And one thing he referred to himself as egotistical dissertation.
Where does he say that?
Or ego, yeah, on the near the end of the letter.
Right,
I beg your,
right. I'm trying to find where he said that.
you did not think by so short a phrase in your letter to have drawn on yourself such an, I don't know if that's a misspelling.
Oh, no, it's egotistical dissertation. He's
Yeah.
basically, it's sort of Jeffersonian humility. He's talking a little bit too much about himself when he shouldn't be, but Hopkinson is drawing him out and asking him to talk a little bit about himself. And he's not considering, he doesn't consider himself to be egotistical.
No.
It's a sort of Jeffersonian humility. Jeffy's getting down where he wants to say, look, I like silent execution of my duty, and here you are forcing me to speak a little bit more about myself than I would have wanted to. But people are asking you about yourself. It's important for you to talk about yourself, right?
Right. If they're asking, give it. And he gives it so eloquently and clear. It's beautiful. He's a great writer. Wonderful. So we have 3 minutes left, Dr. Holowchak. Can you give us a teaser on what we can expect next week?
Well, I thought I didn't have anything here that segues into this, but I thought I want to do something a little bit different.
Okay.
I have said all along that Jefferson was one of the politicians of his day that was really wedded to land. As a lawyer, most of the cases concern land.
Right.
More than any other president in the history of the United States, as an architect, a gardener, a builder, and everything, he could look at a plot of land, and in his head, he's thinking, how do I improve this? Can I put a garden here? Do I build this there? And when we talk about architecture, you can't just put any building anywhere.
And he sees geometrical shapes.
Well, you've got to work within the landscape as well, and you can't put plants in the ground when there's too much rainfall and the plants don't like too much. You got to know the plants, you got to know the ground. But when he saw land, he saw improvement. So I thought going to his letter to Captain Meriwether Lewis on June 20, 1803, while he's president. Remember the famous Lewis and Clark expedition?
Yes.
It's a very long letter, but it's a fascinating letter where he goes into detail apropos of his instructions for Meriwether Lewis. What does he want him to do? So we're going to get some idea of Jefferson's love of the land and Jefferson's vision of the Louisiana Purchase. We see that has been made.
Great.
We're going to see Jefferson's vision of Jefferson entertains the view that perhaps all of the land from the Atlantic to the Pacific at some time might be part of a great country. And what can we do with that? Land means resources. It means possibility for a great empire for liberty. So we'll answer the question, what was the point of the Lewis and Clark expedition? We'll answer the questions. What was the point? What sort of instructions does he give? And how do these instructions relate to Jefferson's view of love of land? So that's it for next week.
Yes. And I can tell you how it benefited females, his vision for the Empire of Liberty.
Didn't you write something about women in the West?
That was my master's.
So I mean, you ought to be interested in that as well.
Yeah. So, and I used his Empire of Liberty as part of my paper.
Right. Okay. Well, that's what we're going to do next week.
Okay, great.
And again, I throw up shamelessly, I throw up my book on Jefferson's Political Philosophy of Metaphysics, Utopia, where I go in detail, talk about Jefferson's utopian vision, the stuff that he read, and talk about his political philosophy in robust detail. Yeah, I think it's a pretty nice little book.
Can people write to you? Do you have can you autograph, and can they purchase a copy?
I have only this one copy here, but if anybody wants to get a copy, you have to go to the publisher. It's Brill in London.
Okay.
Or as the French would say, Londres.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Holowchak. It's been It's always wonderful learning
Thank you
about
for
Thomas
smuggling me in
Jefferson.
here on this late Thursday, or not so late.
Friday.
Friday.
Yeah, we're a few days